changed our relationship with the planet, and it's all come about through growth. Growth in population, in technology, in consumption, in the global economy, and in the rise of cities, and it has been catastrophic. In the past 2 months alone, reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, from the journal Nature, from the United States government indicate that we are on a path that threatens our very survival as a species.
There was a sense of pessimism in what you had to say about the urgency and the impacts of climate change and a sort of existential crisis, potential to end our civilization. Is that too dramatic?
No, I think that we've left the handling of this in such a way that we're now given a very tiny window to respond in any massive way. The special report of the IPCC that just came out has tended to be very, very conservative. This is the authoritative group of climatologists from around the world. But because it's intergovernmental, it means that all countries with an interest can vet the report. So Saudi Arabia looks at it, the United States looks at it, and they tweak it and they change it. It's always coming out the most conservative document.
But even that report highlights how dramatic.
Exactly.
We've got 12 years to halve emissions.
The thing that is that I tried to present here, if you look at the history of our understanding that climate change is a phenomenon we have to pay attention to, the first guy to describe it was Joseph Fourier in 1824, that he described the greenhouse effect. And then, of course, it became more and more serious in the 20th century, and by the 1950, Mikhail Bodyko, a Russian climatologist, said, look, there are all of these positive feedback loops that will amplify the impact of just adding carbon dioxide, so it'll accelerate. And he predicted back in the 1950s, Arctic sea ice is going to melt, that will expose the ocean, which will absorb more heat, and it'll accelerate global warming. So that by 1965, the president of the American petroleum industry said, look, you gotta face it, we're running out of time. We face a crisis that is coming from burning coal, oil, and natural gas. This is the president of the petroleum industry said this. Exxon's own scientists, and I quoted them in my speech, were saying, look, we know that fossil fuels are at the heart of this warming. In 1989, I interviewed the new Minister of the Environment, well, it was 1988, Lucien Bouchard. I said, Mr. Bouchard, what's the most important issue facing Canadians? Right away, he said, global warming. And I said, how serious is it? And these are his exact words. It threatens the survival of our species. We have to act now. It was in 1988 that the beginning of the IPCC gathered in Toronto, 300 climatologists. They were so alarmed, they said the evidence is in. Humans are causing a phase of global warming. And they called for a 20% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in 15 years. That was it. Wow. That was the call, the science was in. What began then was a massive disinformation program. Exxon, whose own scientists had told them in the 1960s that climate change was happening from fossil fuels. They then began to spend tens of millions of dollars in a campaign of disinformation. They said, no, this is a natural cycle, it's caused by sunspots, this is junk science, all of that stuff. And it was driven by the same people that had fueled the tobacco industry's denial that smoking caused cancer. The same people use the same tactics, create uncertainty in the mind of the public. Oh, no. Certainly in Canada, young people have got it. Their teachers have been very effective. There was a gathering last month in California that the governor of California called. Al Gore was there, and it was an international meeting. And the youth delegates there said, look, we don't want to hear all this depressing stuff. Tell us what we can do. We want to get on with action. So the youth are galvanized, and I think now we better start listening. This is just crazy. We're using, it's not just the atmosphere, we're using air, water, we're using the soil. We are, indigenous people talk about Mother Earth, and they say it that we literally are born out of the earth, because the air is in our bodies, it's circulating through us. What air comes out of my nose goes straight up your nose. So we're linked together in a matrix of air. And then you and I are inflated by the water that fills our cells, and we're created by the food that comes from the soil. We are created out of Mother Earth. And yet we use Mother Earth as a garbage can. The problem is the economic system itself at the heart is the cause of the crisis that we're facing. It's what's driven Exxon and all of the fossil fuel companies. Even though they knew we were trashing the planet, profit comes before anything else. You can't add any more air, water, soil, or biodiversity. And every scientist I've talked to says we're already past the 59th minute. I was beginning my career at a university as a professor in 1962.
Okay.
And I was a hotshot geneticist. I was going to make my name. And a woman published a book that changed my life. Her name was Rachel Carson. And as I read Silent Spring, all about the unexpected effects of pesticides, I realized, oh my God, scientists are very good at inventing and finding something like DDT.
Yes.
But because we focus on a part of nature, we can't see the context, the bigger picture. And it's a weakness of the scientific process. And the other thing is that we don't know enough to be able to anticipate all of the effects. So we spray DDT on farmers' fields. The guy that discovered DDT kills insects, Paul Muller, won a Nobel Prize in 1948. And then we discover, oh my God, it blows into rivers and into lakes, and it affects fish and birds and humans. And then eagles begin to disappear, and scientists discover something we didn't even know about called biomagnification, concentrating up the food chain. So over and over again, we're a very inventive creature, but because we don't see the bigger picture, we can't anticipate what the consequences.
I co-founded this campaign in 2017 with visionary lawyer Polly Higgins, who dedicated the last 10 years of her life to taking forward a crime of ecocide at the International Criminal Court. Polly's journey began when she asked herself a simple question: how do we create a legal duty of care for the earth? That question took her on a journey that was to last the rest of her life. Polly is sadly no longer with us. She died after a rapid, aggressive cancer in Easter 2019. And she left us with a legacy of doing something different with law, of creating new law, of creating a law that aligns our legal system with a moral code that we can all relate to. In our hearts, we all know it's wrong to harm the earth. It's already a matter of conscience. What our campaign is doing is making it a matter of law. If you've heard the word ecocide, it's almost certainly because of Polly's work. She was always completely uncompromising with her vision, and it was a vision of a world that operates very differently to the world we're in now. A world that operates on the basis of a really simple principle: first, do no harm. We're familiar with this in the medical context, in the Hippocratic Oath: first, do no harm. But we don't apply it to the world that sustains us, to the world of which we're an integral part. And that was something that Polly wished to address with the law of ecocide. When she started researching, she found that ecocide was originally in the drafting of the Rome Statute, which is the governing document of the International Criminal Court. But it never quite made the final cut, because certain influential countries somehow managed to disappear it at the last minute. Polly's mission, therefore, was to reinstate effectively the missing crime against peace, as those international crimes were originally known. Polly soon realised that those wealthy countries were not going to be those who would support such an amendment. So a few years ago, she started to focus on the small Pacific Island states, and together we co-founded this campaign in 2017 to take forward support for those states to move forward with this law at the International Criminal Court. Everybody who met Polly almost fell in love with her. She had an inspiring, visionary quality about her that was uncompromising and yet incredibly compassionate, and non-judgmental. She inspired people right across the world. And now that she's no longer here, it seems that her spirit, if you like, is inspiring many more to join this campaign and to help us take forward her legacy. If anything, the Stop Ecocide campaign is accelerating. Our number of Earth protectors is growing every day, and we'd love you to be part of that. This is a campaign where you, as an Earth protector, can actively take part in putting in place a law that will protect our beautiful planet. Join us today. Become an Earth protector.
Hello, I'm from the US government with an update on our pandemic response. In the space of just a few months, our "don't worry bro, it's just the flu" policy has gotten a shit ton of you killed. Some say this tragedy was inevitable, but actually, studies show that if we'd simply responded like other governments who listen to scientists instead of Chuck Woolery and the My Pillow guy, we could have prevented almost all of those deaths. Unfortunately for you, the amount of responsibility we take in doing our job comes to approximately fuck all. Which is why we got more of you killed than 50 9/11s. Trump 2020. With a president like this, who needs terrorists? As part of our distract from how many of you were getting killed policy, we'll be telling you the real threat to America is minorities demanding not to be